Hello and welcome to EvilGinger Miniatures, where I'm doing a role-playing review for the first time in a considerable period of time, but it's one I've been waffling about in other episodes of other series, and I finally got around to doing it, mostly because I've found the requisite book. And it's HackMaster. This is my very well-loved and somewhat battle-damaged HackMaster Player's Handbook. It's one of the classic 3 books you need to play the game. There is a monster manual which is called the Hackopedia. There's 2 volumes of that. I only have volume 1. It's down here. This is the Hackopedia volume 1. And there's a second one which I will be getting, including a better conditioned version of this and better conditioned versions of the Player's Handbook. Because unfortunately, when these were designed, the paper they're printed on, they're very well done, but the paper they printed on was too heavy for this binding, and it just ripped away on both of them. The GM's Guide, which I have the hardback one, which is now completely out of print and unavailable, was on a paper that was more top. The binding was basically able to take it, but again, this has been used quite a lot. And I got all of these from Spirit back in the day, and I will be going and getting the other ones directly from Kenzo & Co, who are the publishers, before they run their new Kickstarter for the 25th anniversary 2026 edition, which should be mostly the same as that, but they are promising some rules tweaks and stuff like that, and I'd like enough of the original version, which I truly and utterly love, to be able to run a game properly. I've got another better conditioned version of the GM Player's Guide sitting downstairs in the workshop somewhere, and I got, I want enough that I can just have a tabletop game with it, because it plays better in person than it does otherwise. Right, what is HackMaster? Basically, HackMaster is what everybody wanted when first edition D&D came out. It is well designed, well balanced, mechanically very simple, to be honest. D20 system that allows you to have all the rough and tumble of first ed with not quite the casualty level, though it's easy to get killed in HackMaster if you're an idiot. It's occasionally possible to get killed if you're not an idiot, but someone else in the party is, and starts fights with things they don't need to, and doesn't actually apply basic strategy and tactics. It works on the grid like D&D. Its main feature that makes it much better than D&D, well, there's 2. One, combat rolls are all opposed, so there's a defense roll by the defender. So you're actively engaged when you're in a fight, even if it's not your turn. There are also no turns as such. Everybody goes on a clock, which is delineated in seconds, and weapon speeds are in seconds between each blow. And basically, if it's 8, you go on 8, 16, 32, and whatever else have you. It's a good idea in a combat if you're a player to have a tally, so you know when you're going next. Things can change and knock you off your routine. You could get hit and knocked back and slowed or fumble something in defense. But as I say, it's a very interactive combat system. It's not terminally lethal, but given other mechanics like exploding dice. Damage dice explode, which means if you roll maximum number on the damage dice, you get to roll it again. Just the dice, and you add it. You actually add it with -1, so if you roll, and most weapons do multiple dice. For example, your classic broadsword in D&D does D8. So in HackMaster it does 2D8, and both can explode. The really dangerous things for exploding dice are things like axes. because your classic battle axe in HackMaster does 3d6, 3d4, which should make it less dangerous than a broadsword, which can obviously do up to 16 points of damage. However, because they're d4s, each of those dice has a 1 in 4 chance of exploding, so you're almost certainly going to get one or two of them exploding every time you roll them, and that will do extra damage, and rate it up with the broadsword. And again, big axes like your Bardiche or Dane axe types will do ridiculous amounts of damage, as will some pole arms, which are axe-like. And again, there are potential. Combat can, as I say, be really lethal and quite swingy, but it averages out, and you're actively involved, and you're thinking all the time while you're playing. But it's basically a D20 system with opposing rolls. Skills are run on a percentage system, and for ordinary simple ones, they're just percentage and roll under. If they're opposed, you both roll your dice and you add your skill to it, and the modifier of how easy the roll is. For example, sneaking up on someone that's asleep, it's going to be very hard for them to notice they're being snuck up on. So the sneaker will get an awful lot of will get a bonus, and it will be a really simple roll. However, the person who's asleep might notice, but they will be at considerable disadvantage, so they'll be at a penalty. But again, the system encourages you not to roll dice when you don't need to, because again, it's dice rolling is only for solving uncertainty, and it makes a good point of that. It's heavily explained in the DM's guide in a somewhat tongue-in-cheek manner, where you are talking about lesser players and lesser games and stuff like that. So there's a little bit left over from HackMaster 4 of the sarcastic and the setup that's in Knights of the Dinner Table, which is also Bakenza, where you get a heavy leaning into of the player versus GM thing. Doesn't have to be played like that. It shouldn't be played like that. Role-playing games shouldn't be played role-playing GM versus player. It's PvE, and all the GM is there to do is manage the E, the environment and the monsters, and occasionally to point out to the players that they're bloody stupid and they're going to die, and do you really want to do that? HackMaster is very much in that line. And again, because combat is less certain, it's not uncommon for what looks like a balanced combat to turn into a bloodbath, or what looks like an unbalanced combat to turn into a ruffle stomp. Classic example of that was a situation where the player characters went into a large room confrontation, big boss battle with a load of goblins and their leader, and the goblins had an ogre, and the ogre attempted to ambush the party as it came to the door. The party saw it coming and was there first. The ogre got hit in the groin with a quarterstaff, and then proceeded not to take any further part in the fight, mostly because the next thing that happened was one of the thieves leapt over and cut its throat. Again, that's quite a common thing in HackMaster, where you've got support characters like roguish types and assassins and stuff like that, who just finish off monsters that are taken down during the combat. It can happen to player characters, but generally it's not done until after a fight, because if someone's down and wounded and not fighting back, they're not of an interest if you've actually got active combatants. So you're dealing with the active combatants first and dealing with the party afterwards. And again, you don't have to murder your player characters, and given how interesting, how involved the character generation is, you don't really want to. You want to develop the characters, but you want to teach them that even if they survive, there's going to be consequences. As a game that encourages players to suffer the consequences of their own stupidity. But you don't have to be too vicious about it. Though some GMs, mentioning no names to protect the guilty, are considerably too vicious about it. I don't think I've ever deliberately killed a character in HackMaster, but my body count is not insignificant, even so. And sometimes they didn't deserve it. Some idiot that survived did deserve it, and we know who that person is, and I'm not mentioning it again, his name, basically to protect the guilty. So, how does HackMaster work? First of all, character generation is a semi-point buy system. The first thing you do is you roll 7 sets of 3d6 in the way you used to for D&D, but there's an extra stat in HackMaster as standard rather than the 6. So you've got the 3 physical stats: strength, dexterity, and constitution. You've got the personality ones: intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And you've also got an appearance stat. You have to roll these in order, in character sheet order. And there's also another modification. If you remember, early versions of D&D used to have a percentile addition to strength if it was 18 or higher. If it was 18, but this is the case with all HackMaster stats. So you'll be talking 1127 as your stat. The 27 is not necessarily that significant. It is with the physical stats where 50.5 is a break point with bonuses, but with the intellectual stats, it's basically not. And stats modify each other, particularly looks modifies charisma, and the various races or species that HackMaster covers often have penalties to stats. For example, dwarves get a considerable penalty to charisma and to appearance, whilst they can drink weak poison like it was nothing, like it was water. Again, because they get a constitution bonus. Elves are quite fragile in the original D&D way. Novel, you can expect all of the demi-human character groups in it. In a standard HackMaster one, though I don't include all of them. And there's a couple of extra interesting ones. Half hobgoblins, who are basically a little bit stronger than humans, but less charismatic. Sorry, that's dust from me moving those books about, because they have been sitting in a bag and sitting under the shelf there for quite some time since I generated the character that is now sitting behind there, and for the online game that I'm not in anymore, because I can't deal with Discord. It just drives me up the wall. It is an appallingly badly designed piece of kit, and just as I say, drives me up the wall. Especially the using it as a sound. If I run an online game ever, I'll be using Roll20 and just Roll20, and Discord, if we use it, it's going to be for secondary comms, not for anything actually in game. Same way as I use it now as Magic again. But basically, you roll your dice, and that's your stat set. You then get bonus points, build points, which you can modify those stats. You can round them up, and I definitely recommend to players that they do round them up, especially if they're under 10, because it's inexpensive to round them up to under 10 if they're under 10, and under 10 tends to cause penalties. So you're at least going to have a character that isn't at a penalty, even if they're not at an advantage in an area. The number of build points you get depends on. You can also swap stats around, but that reduces the number of build points you get. You can basically put them in any order you like, but then you don't get any build points. If you swap 2 of them, say you want to play a wizard and you've rolled 18 something strength, and you would really rather not have the 5, you would really rather swap that over, you can add a penalty to the additional build points that you get, and you can shape them and engineer things and round things up, and you'll get occasional where you roll a 90 something on the percentile dice, and you can quite easily round it up to the next level, because 00 is effectively the next, is, you know, 00 isn't actually a thing so much as just the next stat up. So you've got 1100 Dex. It's basically you spend a build point and round it up to 12, and a few percentiles. In that case, it would be 1204, which again, the percentages are also important when it comes to character development, because every time you level, your stats go up, all of them, apart from looks, which is static but might go down from aging. Basically, you've got two options. You get an automatic gain on all of the 6 stats, which you determine by a dice roll, and you get one of each of the primary 6 dice in the classic D&D dice set. So one of them goes up by d20, another one goes up by d12, then by d10, then by d8, then by d6, then by d4, and you get to choose which ones they are. And again, you can gradually over the time, as your character levels up, push round your stats up. So there's always something to do at that. You also get 15 build points every time you level. Most of the time, there are some classes that don't get 15 build points, but you can spend those on stats, you can spend them on skills, you can spend them on abilities like weapon proficiencies and stuff like that, armor proficiency, shield proficiency, and stuff like that. Skills that are class dependent are usually either free or really cheap, but there's nothing to stop, as I've mentioned before, your wizard being relatively good at lock picking. It's just that he's never going to be as good at it as a thief or one of the roguish types, like the rogue or the assassin, or across all the mixed class fighter thieves or mage thieves, because they get it at a discount. However, and particularly thievish skills are very expensive. You'd be talking about 15 or 16 build points. So if you're for some of them, if you want them, you're going to have to save up if you're not a thief or related class. Biggest strength of the game is the clerics. There are dozens of classes of clerics, but scores of classes of clerics. They've just finished off the cleric splat books, and I believe there are 8 in the base book. So there's 8 different sorts of cleric in this original book, in the book, this one, in the Player's Handbook, across the range from paladin-esque to thief-esque to assassin-esque, and they're often best to envision them as cross classes. You know, there's a Cloak of the Traveller is effectively a ranger cleric, as is the Cleric of the Patient Arrow, but clerics of the Patient Arrow are missile combatants, whereas the Traveller is good at, literally travelling, and usually first aid and healing. So imagine sort of Aragon and the healing herbs and stuff like that. And first aid is really important in the game, because there isn't a great deal of healing in the basic setup. It's a low magic environment, and not all clerics get healing, and not all clerics get healing at the same level to the same amount. So and also every single cleric apart from one only gets one of each spell that they can have. So you're only going to have one healing spell at first level. You can't load up with all the first level healing spells, even if you get them at first level, and not all clerics do. And there are lots of healing spells, some of which are very minor and some of which are quite powerful, and there are also spells for healing particular injuries and stuff like that, which are things that come off the critical table. The critical table is great fun, and again, if a little bit ruthless. And we had a whole adventure on one occasion, which was basically getting a two-handed axe wielder to a healer cleric who could fix a disabling wound, which if it had been allowed to heal would have crippled him for life and certainly prevented him from using a two-handed axe ever again, before it naturally healed. So they were just keeping him going. And he was an ungrateful bastard. He was an NPC, which I put in the party because none of them wanted to play fighters. And he got really seriously injured. But that was 3 or 4 sessions of getting him to a town where he could get healed. And he was healed, and he was ungrateful, and because he was a horrible person. But the party didn't realise that, and he was one of the company, so they looked after him, even if he went and did the proverbial to them afterwards. So that was that. The other thing about combat is that if you get reduced to 0 hit points, you are dying. You're not dead, but you're going to be losing a 1 hit point every 10 seconds. And whilst you can stabilise, it's difficult because most people have cons in the 10, 11 score. Occasionally you get a dwarf who's got a ridiculous con. I mean, I had one with a 22 constitution, and yeah, they got badly wounded and were dying, and they spontaneously stabilised. Normally it requires a first aider or a healing spell, which at least stops bleeding. So you're basically unconscious but not dying. Because again, if they don't bring you back above 0, you're out of it but not dying, so you're not actually bleeding. And again, healing is slow, and it's per wound, so each individual wound is adjudicated separately, and the fewer hit points each in the wound, the quicker it will overall heal. Generally, bruisey type wounds like 1 or 2 hit points will heal in overnight or in a day. Grievous wounds like 15 or 16 hit points might take weeks. And again, this is a very valuable use of a cleric healing spell, because 2 or 3 points of healing, even from a weak healing spell, can shorten your healing time considerably. And as the cleric gets them every day, again, they're beneficial. Also, nursing care from a good first aider will speed healing, and as will not being in a shitty environment like out on an adventure, when sometimes wounds won't heal at all without the intervention of a first aider or magic. So that's the way the combat system is. Very old school. When you level, you have to do training. Below 5th level, you can self-train easily. Above 5th level, you generally need to have someone who's a higher level than you and is a competent trainer. And occasionally there are organisations which just go around training people. So your common or gardener person is probably going to be 5th level or less. There are also special rules for really beginning characters, 0 level, but they don't cover all of the classes of cleric yet. And I'm rather hoping they will do at some point soon, because beginning, funnel-like games where you play several characters and they might have, not all of them might make it, are fun, and people who start off as effectively slightly skilled peasants are also on occasion fun. So that's another option. Alignment works like D&D classically, in that there are the 9. The only people who have to be of any particular alignment are clerics, who have to have the alignment of their deity. So if you're worshipping a chaotic evil deity, you have to be chaotic evil. Don't recommend being chaotic evil, because most chaotic evil behaviour will get you killed in normal D&D fairly quickly, get you killed in HackMaster in literal seconds. However, if you're powerful, chaotic and cunning, you can get away with stuff. And again, there are also advanced classes which you can only get depending on alignment. For example, you can only be a knight if you're of unlawful alignment, because all the knightly orders are lawful. The paladins are all lawful good, but that's a development of knight, and you'll get no starting paladins. You'll get paladin-like people, but they are clerics generally of lawful good gods like the True, who's the god of law, the word, I think, and there's another heroic one which again can get a side entry into Paladin from cleric rather than from fighter. Paladin starters. Classic Paladins are fighter, knight, paladin, whereas the clerics of, I think, the can't remember the name of the god. The other lawful good god can cross class from cleric into a paladin-esque thing, and again, it's a different premium class route. Non-humans can't basically be paladins because it's a very human thing. Non-humans technically can't be knights, though I do generally house rule that in certain cultures half-elves can be knights, and in other cultures half-hobgoblins, the Silkrag, who can also be knights. But there's certain religious knights. There are generally of either lawful or evil alignment. General way of playing the game is that I don't actually have any evil characters because a lot of people get evil silly, and you can just be as conniving and horrible as most evil characters without actually having to have an evil alignment. So it's generally good or neutral, and we try and get the party to be ethic similar. I've played evil games and they're quite fun, but because it's a team game, you have to be very careful to play as team players, otherwise your body count ups. And playing extremely chaotic and doing what your character would do all of the time without any influence of survival has a negative effect on your survival. You gain hit points every level when you level up, but it's not necessarily a whole dice worth. That's every other level in most character classes. In other character classes, in the other level, you roll and you remember you've written down what your hit points were gained from the dice last time, and if you roll again and you exceed them, you might gain 1 or 2 because you've rolled 6 on the D8 rather than the 4 that you rolled earlier. So that increases. There'll be a lot more about character generation and stuff like that as I go through our heroes and generate their characters, and I also use the 0 level characters as the linkmen and the camp guards, which I'm working on, and a few other things like that. And that's HackMaster. It's an extraordinarily good game, and at some point in the very near future, I'm going to be running an in-person game as well for 6 players, probably once a month. I've got a sort of venue. It would be nice to do it in the workshop, but the workshop is an utter tip at the moment, and I need a massive spring clean, possibly several, one after the other. But at any rate, I think that's probably more than enough of me for now, talking about HackMaster. There will be more of it in due course, but I hope everybody's enjoyed that, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe and do all of the YouTube friendly things, because as well as the historical painting stuff, this is going to be a HackMaster channel. So take care everybody for now, and goodbye. At least when I find the mouse. Goodbye everybody.